Rebecca Goodland, hi, thank you. I love how encouraging you guys are. It's awesome. And I'm the children's pastor here at Abundant Life Church. I am here for almost a year. So I think September 11th is my year. I did not start as the youth pastor. I'm not even the youth pastor. You are. I did not start as the children's pastor. I came on as the administrator for the kids and youth, and then in December, I guess, I stepped into the children's pastor role.
We tricked you.
I got one.
Oh,
I got one.
I don't have to pass this.
We tricked you. We hired you for like a different role.
That's what they tell me.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're a veteran now, basically.
Right.
My name is Chad Partridge. I am the, thank you. I am the groups and spiritual formation pastor, and I have been here for so long. It's been a month.
Yes. But you've been here long enough to be a veteran. You're not the rookie, which
yes,
is
I'm
great.
not the, thank you, Jamie.
Yes.
My pleasure. Is this oh yeah, okay. Hi again, it's me. So thank you. So I am the youth pastor, and my name is Jamie, and I've been here 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, this morning what we're going to do is we're going to talk about stories, and I think everybody loves a good story, right? And stories are pretty powerful. We just had the Olympics. I think one of the fun things about the Olympics is when they share the stories of the athletes. There's something about a good story that is powerful. It's inviting. It like moves us. It helps us to connect with others. Stories, they draw us in. They might inspire us to take like steps of bravery and things like that. Stories also could like stir in us emotion or things like empathy or compassion. They may even lead us to tears. And I appreciate Pastor Aaron was up here just sharing, but Pastor Aaron shared before that after a tough week that he kind of processes a tough week by going and watching a movie that is maybe really sad. And so he might watch a movie like maybe The Notebook or Titanic or Dead Poet Society. But I heard that it's Inside Out. I think I see it. Yeah, there we go. This movie right here. Where are we going to show? Oh, it's up there. This one was a real tearjerker. So it's like puddles of like tears for this one. I don't relate to that at all. I think I'm heartless a little bit. And so, for me, if I'm having a tough week, it usually is watching something with more like explosions and guns. I don't know. I remember one Christmas Eve, it was after like all of the services that we had, and I was exhausted, and we put the kids to bed, and we're wrapping gifts. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to watch this movie right here. Yeah. Which is a really great Christmas movie, like super uplifting. And then I just dropped my daughter off at college in Arizona, and there was like an over-under if I would cry or not. I did not cry. I miss her a lot, but I did not cry. I went back to the hotel room and I watched The Equalizer. So like, I don't know what's wrong with me. But do you guys have like a favorite story, something that you really connect with, maybe a book or a movie?
Pick me.
We're up.
I've been so excited, and I have to say thank you for asking this question, so I get to say this in church, and my family or my husband mostly, will laugh, because every time I watch Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, I preach a sermon at home, and I asked Jeff, how long do I have? And he said not very long, so I have to be quick. So there is that moment in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince right after, and I hope I'm not giving anything away. Okay, spoiler alert, cover your ears if you haven't seen it. Right after Dumbledore is killed, and the kids are all sad, of course, and they're all at Hogwarts, and they're all outside, and it's all sad, and it's all dark outside, and I'm gonna stand up because I get very excited. And one of the kids just lights their wand, and they raise it in the sky, and then slowly, and I'm gonna cry because I love this moment, slowly every kid there lights their wand and they raise it up. And every single time I think of John 5:5, where it says the light shines in the darkness and the darkness will not overcome it. And that is that moment. And I get so worked up every single time. And the other thing is that they are doing something that is hard for them and that is going to hurt them, but ultimately it does something amazing for the next generation, and it's powerful for the next generation, and they are kids. Anyway, I love it. So thank you so much for asking me this question.
You want to go after that?
Who's got a topper?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have anything that's. I'm not standing up. So I'll do a couple of things. So if it's something it's been hard, you can laugh at me, it's fine. I'm a Beverly Hills Cop movie fan. So I just need a good laugh and to shut my brain off. But the other thing that I do is I'm a huge Frank Peretti fan, novel-wise, and I love Piercing the Darkness and This Present Darkness. And when I need to be encouraged of how important our prayer lives are, I'll pick up one of those books again and I'll start reading it again and get encouraged. But man, I don't have that much excitement and a big verse out of a movie because there's nothing really to take from Beverly Hills Cop. But yeah, that's what I do.
That's awesome. What about you, Jamie?
All right, so the first impactful movie that I watched was called Soul Surfer, which is about Bethany Hamilton, a professional surfer, and she lost her arm in a shark attack when she was 13 years old. And so that was the first time. At the same time, I watched that I was in high school, and she was about the same age when I was going through something hard, which you'll hear about in a little bit. But that really, there's a quote at the end of the movie, I'm going to butcher it, but at the end of the movie, a reporter's asking her, like, if you could go back to that day and change it, would you? And she says, I wouldn't be able to embrace as many people if I had two arms than with one. And so for me, that's always stuck with me because I think that a lot of the times our capacity, if it's less than, or if we have chronic pain, or if we are less than what we used to be, then we think that we're not useful to the kingdom of God. But that's just a testament to God uses us exactly how we are, whether we are better or worse or whatever it is in our perspective. So there we go.
That's awesome. You know, by the way, Soul Surfer is one of my daughter's favorite movies, or my daughter's one of her favorite movies. So yeah, there you go. What I think is interesting from just hearing all of you share, right, is like there is something in a story that we connect with, that moves us, that kind of challenges us in something. And as we kind of get going this morning, I guess, church, I want you to know that you have a story. You have a story, and your story is important, and your story is powerful. Like if you have encountered Jesus in your life, then you have a Jesus story. You have a faith story, and your story is valuable, it's powerful, and it's important. Jesus is writing a story in your life, and it's a story that's unique only to you. It belongs to you, and it may be a story of overcoming. It may be a story of transformation. It may be a story of healing, a story of hope, a story of forgiveness, a story of a changed life. Like, you have a story. It's a powerful story, and it's a story that's meant to be shared. And so one of the things that we want to do this morning is I want to talk a little bit about kind of your story and help you maybe understand what is your Jesus story, and maybe give you the confidence to be able to share that story. And we're going to do that by looking at a story in the Bible. It's a story about Jesus. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And if you want to follow along in your Bible or on your phone, we're going to be in John chapter 9. And I think this story is going to help us sort of uncover our own story with Jesus and maybe gain some confidence in how to share it. It's the story of when Jesus heals a man who was born blind. And so in John chapter 9, verse 1, it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sin or his parents' sin? And so we have Jesus and his disciples, his followers, they're walking along the road. They encounter this guy who's begging along the road, and he's a blind man. Actually, we learn that he's blind from birth. He has never seen the world around him. And so the question that these guys ask is actually kind of a strange question, because he's always been blind. But the reality is, in this culture, in this particular time, Like that was the belief that if somebody was sick or suffering, that there must have been something either they did wrong or a parent did wrong, and this was the result of that is the consequences of their sin. And so then what Jesus does is he helps to kind of sort of shape the thinking on that, the perspective on that. And in verse 3 it says, "It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins," Jesus answered. "This happened so the power of God could be seen in him." And I think it's important for us to recognize, right, sin and or suffering and sickness are things that are not necessarily tied to good or bad choices. It's part of just living in this broken kind of fallen world that we live in. And so what Jesus is trying to do is trying to reshape the perspective to get the focus off the man or his parents and instead put the focus on God and the power of God and the ability for God to show up and do something incredible in his life. You see, in the midst of our greatest brokenness is where God's glory shines the brightest in our lives. And so then check out what happens next. This is one of my favorite parts of the story. John chapter 9, verse 6 through 7 says, "Then Jesus spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. And he told him, 'Go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam,' which means sent. So the man went and washed, and he came back seeing." Now, Jesus had different ways that he went about healing people. It seemed like it was never the same way. But this one has got to be one of the coolest. I mean, and sometimes you have to put yourself, right, in the shoes of like one of the characters in the story. And so I just imagine as like this scene is unfolding, put yourself in the shoes of the disciples. I mean, here's Jesus interacting with the blind guy, and then he just like hawks a big loogie on the ground, right? And then takes it and he's like making little mud pies like with it in the ground and then just starts smearing it on the guy's eyes. I mean, that's what's going on. And you just got to imagine like the disciples like just nudge like guys, that is so nasty. Jesus, what are you doing? Like you just got to see this thing like unfold, right? And then Jesus tells the guy like, "Okay, now go wash it off," which is kind of a polite thing to do after you've put mud on a guy's eyes. And the question then becomes like, why did he do that? I mean, did Jesus have to put mud on the guy's eyes in order to heal him? And I don't think so, right? Jesus is Jesus. Why would he do that? And it doesn't really tell us why he chose to heal him this way, but I have a suspicion. I have a wonder. I wonder if it was to test the man to see if he would actually trust Jesus with his life. So you put yourself in the shoes of the blind man. Hey, we were just in the shoes of the disciple. If you put yourself in the shoes of the blind man, imagine for a second, like this guy had been blind from birth. That means he's never seen anything. He's never seen color. He's never seen the faces of his parents or friends. Darkness is the only thing this guy has ever known. Think about that for a minute. How might you feel? How might you guys feel? Any words come to mind?
Hopeless.
Hopeless, yeah?
Scared.
Scared, any?
Lonely.
Lonely, yeah, those are words that I thought as well, like isolated. You wonder how many people came by and made fun of him, that he, might have felt a little bit of shame. Maybe wondering to himself, is anything ever gonna change? Or is this the best that life has to offer? And I just wonder like if you've ever felt that way. And so Jesus then, he shows up and he asks this guy to trust him, right? So he does the whole mud pie thing and he puts it on his eyes and now he's like, go wash it off. And I just have to imagine like how many people came by and made fun of this guy. And so he's got to be like, there's a moment I think in his life where he's got to be wondering like, is Jesus clowning on me or is Jesus caring for me? Like what is going on here? And it's a moment where he has to like maybe trust Jesus to do what Jesus is asking him to do, even though it seems like life is just kind of hopeless and nothing is really changing for his whole life. And I'm wondering like if anyone ever might relate to that feeling when it comes to Jesus. I know, Chad, like we've kind of talked and you kind of went through a season where you felt maybe a little bit like that, where it just seemed like you were kind of praying and hoping and nothing was really changing. Like, do you mind telling us a little bit of kind of your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 3 kids and my middle son, Keenan. Starting in 3rd grade, he got something called the rotavirus. And basically what that does is it destroys your intestines and your inside and your gut. And we didn't really know what it was. We didn't know what was going on, but he would be writhing in pain most of the day, all through the night. And it was really, really, really challenging. And it's not something that just ended. It's something that we fought with and fought through for years. And my son and I would have a routine at night, and we talk, and I try to do a few things to make him laugh because he has a great sense of humor, so we would always still laugh and smile. And then we pray a little bit. And I remember, sorry if I cry, a few months in, he looks at me and he says, Papa, is it always going to be like this? Am I always going to feel like this? And I answered it pretty well. And we prayed and I loved on him. And I went out in the hall and I just broke. And I'm like, God, why? Why does he have to feel this way? And I went down to my basement. We had a basement in that house. And I just got on my knees and I would pray. And I would pray what I would call David prayers in the Psalms, where he starts off and he's like, God, why are my enemies against me? God, why is this happening? God, why is this happening? But then in the end, because God would just flood the room, he'd be like, but you are my rock. But you are my fortress. You are my peace. And like I said, it was a lot of years. It took a lot of years. He's doing well now. But it took a lot of years to get there. And there were many, many, many nights that I felt hopeless. Many nights where I would struggle. But one of the things that was amazing during this time is just the unbelievable grace and love that God showed our family. It made my kids more compassionate for other people. It made us more compassionate for other people. And he is this just crazy amount of grace that you would get, because you get up in the morning, you got to do the day all over again. You get up the next day, you got to do it all over again. You're talking to, I don't know, we talked to so many doctors. We did so many blood tests. We did so many x-rays. We did so many MRIs. It was just insane. But God's hand and his love and his grace through all of it. And he walked with us through the entire thing. And it just that deepened relationship with the Lord that you never want to walk through pain, but when you do, it's pretty amazing how God holds you the whole entire time.
If you need it. Thank you for sharing that story. I think that there's always like that moment where just kind of like the blind guy, right, in life where you have to kind of come to that point of, am I going to continue to trust Jesus even when it feels like nothing is going to change? And so glad to hear that, he's doing well today. As we get back to the story of the blind guy, right, that's the moment that he was in. Am I going to trust Jesus with this? Because, this is all I've known. He's probably sought all of the answers. And now we're dealing with kind of mud and go washing. That's all I've got to do. And so the blind guy actually takes Jesus at his word. He goes down the pool and he washes. And then it says immediately he was able to see. Now imagine that. All you've known is darkness. And all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, light and color just flood into your eyes, into your brain, that you all of a sudden can see the whole world has just been illuminated before you in an instant. And this guy's life changed through this encounter with Jesus. And what's interesting, what happened in this setting, is then all of a sudden this blind guy became the talk of the town. Everybody in town is talking about it, right? I mean, they're at the grocery store, the mall, the barbershop, the whatever, and they're all talking did you hear about the blind guy? And did it really happen? I don't know, I don't think so. And, and so people are coming up to him and they're asking him hey, how did this happen? What's going on? He's like, I don't know. This guy Jesus came, he made mud pies, he put them on my eye, went and washed, and now I can see. That's kind of been his story. And so the whole town's in a frenzy. And so they decide to alert the Pharisees, who were the religious rulers. And essentially the Pharisees were like the religious rule followers, right? You had to follow the rules. And so they alerted them of what was going on with the blind guy. And really what happened is Jesus healed him on what was a Sabbath day. And you weren't supposed to do any work, even if it was good work, any work on the Sabbath. And so now Jesus is busted. So they're less concerned about the miracle and more concerned about busting Jesus. So the Pharisees call him in, and they start grilling the guy. Like, who is this Jesus? And is he a sinner? Is he not a sinner? Is he God? Is he not God? And the man tells them basically the same story. Like, I don't know. Like, I was blind. Jesus showed up, and now I put mud in my eyes, and now I can see. And so the Pharisees keep pressing him for more information, and they're not getting anywhere. So they go to his parents. And so they go to his parents and they start grilling his parents with 100 questions. Like, is this your son? Was he born blind? Can he see now? Like, how can he see? Who healed him? Like, all the questions. And so his parents like confirm what's going on. They're like, yep, this is our son. He was born blind since the very beginning. And he can see now, and beyond that, you're going to have to talk to him because he's old enough, he's an adult, you go talk to him. And so they go back to the blind guy who's not blind anymore, and we pick up the story, and it says for the second time, they called the man in who had been blind, and they told him, God should get the glory for this because we know that this Jesus is a sinner. And which is interesting, right, is they're again trying to figure out kind of who Jesus is. And what I want you to do is I want you to see the man's response, because the way he responds to these guys is essentially his story. This is his story. And in verse 25, the man responds to their accusations. He says this, I don't know whether he is a sinner. The man replied, but I do know this. I was blind, and now I can see. I love that, right? It's a simple but powerful story. And what you see in that is like the way he responds is like, I don't know everything there is to know about Jesus. I don't have it all figured out. I don't have like kind of a theology or a Bible degree or anything like that explains like all of who Jesus is. I don't know whether he's a sinner or not. I just know that I was blind and I had this encounter with Jesus, and now I can see. And that's his story. I was blind all my life. I was lonely. I was isolated. I was hopeless. I was begging for food along the road. I had no friends. Everybody was making fun of me. Jesus walks into my life. He touches my eyes. And when he touched my eyes, he changed my life, and I can see. I have hope now. I have joy. I have new purpose for life. I have a new life. And that's what Jesus did for me. That's a story. And so I wonder, like, as we kind of talk about, like, kind of just stories this morning, as we kind of consider that, I'm wondering if Rebecca and Jamie, you might share a little bit of your story of, like, what happened when you encountered Jesus. And I know, like, we were talking earlier this week, and one of the things that's true of both of you, also true of me, is that we've grown up in the church. And so we've kind of known about Jesus. We've walked with Jesus for a long time, and maybe some of you have as well, or maybe some of you are kind of like the blind guy. Like you've kind of been, navigating through life, and you had an encounter with Jesus, kind of like the blind guy. For some of you, maybe it's been kind of a long journey. And what's interesting is, like, even if you've been walking with Jesus since the beginning or for a really long time, we all have a story where Jesus steps in and we encounter Jesus. And in fact, the longer you walk with Jesus, the more stories you should have, because Jesus doesn't just step into your life in one moment. Jesus repeatedly steps into our life, right? And so the longer we walk with him, the more like kind of stories we have. And so, Rebecca, I'm wondering if we didn't paper, rock, scissors who was going to go first, but if you might share a little bit of just kind of your story of when you had an encounter with Jesus that changed your life.
Yes, yeah, that can be a question that, because I grew up in the church and in a Christian home, and my mom told me I asked Jesus into my heart when I was 4. Sometimes I struggle to, I don't have a dramatic I was blind, but now I see moment. But it is, as Jeff said, all through your life you have moments, right? And you have times where your faith has to become your own and not what you grew up with. And you have to choose whether to follow Jesus or whether to not follow Jesus. And just in kind of thinking and praying about this, I think the moment that I wanted to share was not a dark moment in my life or anything, but it was, and the Lord's been really faithful to me in just guiding and directing my life. And if I look back, like, I think something that probably changed the trajectory of my life happened in my senior year of high school, and that's what I want to share. So kind of a little bit of background. I went to Christian school through 8th grade. Then I homeschooled 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. And as I came to the end of my 11th grade year, I really just felt like I didn't want to continue homeschooling. And so I prayed about it, and the Lord kind of directed me to go to the public school in my area. And I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania, for those that don't know. And so I ended up doing that, which was a big change from kind of growing up in sheltered Mennonite community and then going to the big public school in our area. And I had a great year. I had a great time. And because of that, when it came to New Year's Eve, I decided to make a New Year's Eve resolution. This was 1996. Don't do the math. And I decided to make a resolution of, Lord, I really loved being directed to go to public school, and so I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do in this year. And asking that in your senior year of high school, like coming back at that, it's like you're making decisions that affect the whole rest of your life. Like you've got to, I don't think I thought about that. So I had told the Lord, like, okay, I'm going to do what you asked me to do. And a big verse in my life is Matthew 6:31-33, and I do want to read it, which is, "So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." And that has been a life verse, and that relates to this story. And I had, previous to this New Year's resolution, I had applied to colleges, got accepted into colleges. And soon after the resolution, I was filling out financial aid forms up in my room. And I physically, I should say, I was trying to fill out financial aid forms up in my room. And I just couldn't. I don't even know what it was. I would pick up a pen, I would stare at the pages, the words would not make any sense. So I would put down the pen, I would stare at the pages, I would pick up the pen, and I'm like, what is happening? And I'm like, finally, like, Lord, what is going on? Why can't I do this? Why can't I fill this out? And I felt like the Lord very clearly met me in that moment and was like, your next step is not going to college. It's going into missions. And I had a friend, an older friend, that had just come back from doing a discipleship training school in Amsterdam, Holland, with Youth with a Mission. And in that moment, I was like, that's what I'm doing. And I went downstairs and I told my parents. Can you imagine? And I was 17. I graduated very early. And I was 17 and I told my parents, I'm going to Amsterdam. And they were like, oh, okay. And that decision and that step and that kind of meeting with the Lord did change my life forever. He took me from a small Mennonite town in Pennsylvania to a very big city. Amsterdam is a very scary place. I had never flown before anywhere. And so basically I turned 18 in December of 1996. In January of 1997, I got on a plane and went away for 6 months. And just during that time, the Lord opened up my eyes to so many things, to my own relationship with him. He just showed me a lot about his love and grace for me. He showed me a lot about the world. We worked with some very dark areas in Amsterdam during that time. We also went on an outreach to the Seychelles Islands, which are down in the Indian Ocean. And there was a group of kids down there that the Lord had just, about a year before that, started a revival among these kids. And they were about my age. And we just got to kind of join in with what the Lord was doing down there. And it was just amazing to see that. I ended up going back 2 years later, and I'm still in contact with some of those kids. And just love kind of seeing and they're not kids anymore, like me, but loved seeing their ongoing, just what the difference that they have made in their country. Like, their country was a place of darkness, and it has a lot of light in it now just because of these kids. And so just being able to see that is amazing. And I'm sorry, I'm probably going on for a little bit. But I just do want to come back to I think in that path, a decision could have been made to follow what was comfortable and do. I know I'm going to have a solid career path. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be provided for and taken care of. And I think that was one of the first big moments where that Matthew 6:33 came into play, where it was like, no, seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, and what you need will be added to you. And that kind of set my life on a path of coming back to that verse again and again and again. And just each step the Lord's kind of guided me to has shown me, you know, it may not be the wisest in the world's path. It may not be the most financially stable path, but that's not what the Lord is worried about. He's worried about seeking him and following him.
That's awesome. One of the things that we shared when we were talking is the fact that you met your husband on the mission field as well, which was awesome. A lot later. But the Lord put in you a desire for ministry and experience for ministry that has now been fulfilled as you're serving as a children's pastor here, which is cool to see how that's come full circle. But yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your story. Jamie, you also have kind of a story to share. You want to share that with us?
Why not? Okay. So when I was 14 years old, I got a head injury, and it took me about 2 years to recover from. I missed a year of school during that time, and then I also went to 5 different types of therapy for over a year to recover. And so that was the first time my relationship with God was really tested, and it became my own because I was heavily involved going to youth group growing up. But I was heavily involved going to youth group, but with my head injury, with the lights and the noise, I couldn't go as much. And so it became, instead of something that my parents just dropped me off at, it was a choice that I had to make for myself to keep my relationship with God consistent, even outside of attending youth group. And so during that time, I, again, was really tested. I was depressed. I felt isolated. I was struggling with the question of, if all I can do is lay in a bed all day with blackout curtains, earplugs in because I can't even handle light and noise, then what's the point of me? If I can't do, again, kind of to earlier when I was sharing about Bethany Hamilton, it's a very different situation, but also the feelings are similar. And for anyone, I mean, here, everyone looks fine. You guys all look great. But everyone looks fine, everything. But if I were to go around and ask every single person in this room what's actually going on, there's always so much more behind the scenes. And so that was something, a common denominator that I've learned over the past 16 years is that to be able to focus on people, to be able to see people, and how there's just more than meets the eye. So during that time, I was in the process of recovering, and then my mom actually, when I was on the tail end of recovering, my mom made me go to youth camp. And I say made because normally I would love to go, but during where I was at with my heart and everything, I'm so sorry. Hi, you guys. So when I was, she made me go to youth camp, and she signed me up, and I remember her saying, Jamie, I know you don't want to go, but I really believe that there's something there that you need to hear. And moms are always right, I will say. So they are always right. So I went to youth camp, and there was an upperclassman there that shared a story about what he was currently going through. And it wasn't anything crazy, but through that, it really articulated what I was feeling and experiencing myself. And after I left youth camp, I went home, and I realized that the one thing that I hadn't done in the past year and a half was that I hadn't surrendered my pain to God. I was just holding on to it so tight, and I was letting that grow bitterness and resentment and frustration and discouragement in me. And so I realized I had a moment of surrender, which I also think that surrender is a continuous choice that we have to make. I think sometimes there might be one moment and something might change, but a lot of the times it's just a continuous choice that we have to make, and it's a heart posture. And so, and also a side note, the next day after I had my moment of surrender, nothing changed. I wasn't healed. I didn't have answers. Nothing circumstantially had changed, but the difference was that I now had freedom in my circumstances because I was able to surrender that to him. And so I continued healing, and in the process, and I still was out of sports, and kind of my normal routine wasn't back to how it used to be. And then I also had to struggle with the question, like, is this for anyone, again, with chronic pain? Like, at first, maybe the first couple weeks, days, months, you think, okay, if you have the hope when you wake up in the morning, like maybe I'm going to feel better today, or maybe my symptoms will lessen. But then it stays, and it's months down the line, and the more time that passes, you realize, actually, this might be my new normal. And then you have to grieve that, because you have to grieve what once was and what now is. And so we're grieving that. We're in the works, and then what God did, and I say all this with the point of pointing out what he can do, but he was able to use my story to share with multiple media outlets to raise awareness about head injuries. And then he also used my story to share about, I got to speak for a nonprofit organization that actually, I got to speak to thousands of kids throughout the next 14 years about head injuries and injury prevention. And then I also got to speak on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. and share my story there with hundreds of doctors and therapists and teachers and athletic trainers. And so, and I don't say that to say, oh, look at me, because I did nothing. I just showed up. I got dressed and I appeared. But he literally connected all of those pieces. He provided hope. Without him, I didn't have any hope in the situation. I didn't have any purpose in it, and he provided all of that, and also joy in the midst of it. And so for me, that was the foundation of my faith, and because I got to see the first characteristic of God firsthand, rather than reading about it or seeing or hearing about it, I got to experience that, and it was his faithfulness. And so from then on, that was the foundation of my faith. And then life got it got a little harder, but that's great, because then I was able to rely on that, to remember God in that moment, that I know that he will use everything he does not waste pain, and he will use everything for our good and his glory. And then the verse that comes to mind is Philippians 1:12. What has happened to me has served to advance the gospel. And that's just what I keep relying on, is that even if I'm in good circumstances or hard circumstances, that is, I get to use whatever my circumstances are to serve others. And so that was kind of the foundation of my,
I think it's kind of wild too, like God and his sense of humor is part of your story, right? Is the pivotal moment was when you were a youth at camp, and here you are now, being able to invest in the next generation. That's awesome.
It's cool too, because I agree, because now I get to be with you guys, which is so exciting. But it is cool though, because like my mom said, like she made me go to camp and I didn't want to go, but if that boy, his name is Tyler, if he hadn't shared his story about what God was doing in his life, that was a game changer for me. So if he didn't share his story, then I wouldn't have come home and had this come to Jesus moment of surrender. And then the other thing I think about too, and then I'm going to give it back to you. Just taking over. But I think about okay, if you look around the room, there's I'm not good with numbers. There's however many of us here. I don't know, what is this? 4, I don't know, whatever, hundreds. Okay. And it's so cool, because it's Tyler shared his story with me, and then I had the opportunity to share with other people. But it's if every single person shared their Jesus story with other people. Rebecca's story is going to reach certain people. Chad's story is going to reach certain people, and then my story will reach certain people. But my story isn't going to hit everyone's heart, because that's maybe different circumstances or whatever it is. But it's but every single person's story is needed to touch another person's life. And so if someone stays quiet and doesn't share their story, then that might miss an opportunity to reach someone else that I can't necessarily reach, or Chad or Rebecca or Jeff. Yes. So anyway, okay, back to you.
Good.
Okay.
You could just finish the message. That would work just fine, yeah. Here's what I love, right? As you hear kind of the stories, you hear the story of the blind man, as you think about your own story, you don't have to have all of the answers to explain your Jesus story, right? You don't have to know everything there is to know about Jesus. You don't have to have a Bible degree or deep-rooted kind of knowledge, or know the 4 happy hops to heaven, or whatever it is. What you have is a story of Jesus impacting your life, encountering your life, and that is powerful, and it needs to be shared. And if Jesus has encountered your life, you have a story. And your story may be something similar to here. It might be like the blind man. It might be, I was blind and now I see. It might be, I was addicted, but I was set free. I was lonely, but found a friend that's closer than a brother. I was hopeless, but I have found hope. I maybe was aimless or purposeless. I found new purpose for my life. I was isolated, but I found community. I was angry, but I have now found joy. I was unforgiving or grieving, and now I found forgiveness. You have a Jesus story. And your Jesus story is, as Jamie was sharing, is important. And I love that you pointed that out because, my guess is, as you've heard some of the stories up here, that there were some things in the stories that you heard up here for some of you that you're like, oh, I really connect with that. Or maybe you're sitting there and you heard something and you're like, I didn't realize somebody else experienced that too. And there was something that maybe was like stirring in your own heart as you heard one of those stories here. And that's the power of stories. And when you share your story, it has the ability to impact the life of another person. Psalms 107 verses 1-2 says, give thanks to the Lord for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Has the Lord redeemed you? In other words, have you encountered the Lord in your life? Have you stepped into a relationship with Jesus? Has the Lord redeemed you? It says, then speak out. Tell others that he has redeemed you from your enemies. And as we kind of kick off this ministry year together, I just have a challenge. I want to, for all of us just as a church to kind of consider, whether you're here for the first time or you've been here forever, is number one, if you've encountered Jesus, who do you need to share your story with? Who is it in your life? And maybe you haven't stepped across that line of faith, and maybe for you it's just saying, hey, I need to learn more about who this Jesus guy is because I need that in my life. But for those of you that have encountered Jesus in your life, I want you to think about, like, what is my story? And who do I need to share it with? It may be a neighbor, a coworker, or a family member, or just somebody, or a friend, or somebody in your life. Who do you need to share it with? And the other question that I want to challenge you with is, who do you need to invite to come sit with you at church? Who do you need to maybe bring along and say, hey, next week we're starting this series. I know the guys came up, they talked about it, and we're calling this like a Come Sit With Me Sunday. And because one of the best things you can do is that you're having a conversation with somebody, and it could be a coworker over a break, or as you're working together, it could be a neighbor, and you're kind of talking across the fence or whatever it is, and somebody's like going through something, and all of us like are going through stuff, but maybe they're sharing like what they're going through. It may be a loss, it may be a relationship challenge, it may be whatever it might be, a health issue, whatever it might be. And I just want to give you some language that you might be able to use. Like, first one is, you might have something in your story that connects with that. And part of the language in that might be, you know what? I've kind of been there. I've walked through some of that too. Can I just share with you my story? Like, I was kind of walking through that situation, but I've met this person named Jesus, and this is what he did in my life. And you just have an opportunity to share your story. Or the other part might be, you know what? Man, I'm part of this church. It's a really good community, and it might have some answers for you. Why don't you come sit with me some Sunday? We're in a series that we're starting next week, and we're calling it Can God? And or I think I saw another title on the series. But here's the premise of the series. Can God be trusted when your circumstances tell you otherwise? And my guess is a lot of us wonder that, even in the room, but we probably have a lot of people in our life that are asking the same question. I might be going through something in my life. Can God really be trusted? Does God really? It's really essentially the blind man. I'm going through something. Can God be trusted? And so I want to encourage you as we kind of kick off the fall that we might be the kind of church and the kind of people that say, hey, we're not going to keep our stories to ourselves. We're not going to keep the hope of Jesus kind of bottled up, but we're going to look for opportunities to share our God story and invite people to come and sit with us at church. Jesus, I just want to thank you for your love and grace. I thank you for our church. I thank you for the staff up here, and God, just to recognize that, God, you are at work. You're moving in our lives. And God, as we encounter your presence in our lives, that there's something that shifts, there's something that changes, there's something that illuminates in us. And God, that's the work that you're doing in us. But God, that's something that's not just to be kept and bottled up. It's something to be shared. And God, may we be a church family that are dispensers of hope to the community around us as we share the good news and the hope that we have discovered, God, in our own lives in you. And so, God, we just pray for each person here. May they discover their story. And God, maybe they have the confidence and the courage to share it. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.